Sunday, and tonight, this killer disease that has kept you and me and the whole world in lockdown for a year, we still don't know for sure where COVID came from. Was it a laboratory, an open market, or a military base? Of course, we could spend hours on the conspiracy theories and claims that have no grounding in reality. But tonight, right here, some of the clearest wheres and whens about the first days of the coronavirus pandemic are coming to light. And let me remind you, this is the disease that has taken the lives of nearly 3.5 million people worldwide. So many of those people dying alone, their loved ones unable to even hold their hands as the contagious virus did and continues to do its damage. This piece published tonight in the Wall Street Journal puts a pin in the timeline of the pandemic and on the world map. Joining me now, one of the writers of that explosive piece coming out tonight, Michael R. Gordon. Michael, thanks for coming on. From the very beginning of this emergency, Chinese officials have adamantly denied that the virus escaped from one of their laboratories. Even the World Health Organization said that was unlikely. But what did you and your colleagues at the Journal find out?
Well, throughout this whole medical crisis, no theory has been proven, fully proven. The theory that it came from a bat and then went to an animal and then went to a human being, that's never been proven because they haven't found any animals that have been contaminated with the virus. The theory that it emerged, escaped from a lab, was initially discounted as a conspiracy theory. But what we found is there's a renewed effort to take a look at the lab theory, primarily because of circumstantial evidence, but significant circumstantial evidence.
And you said the new effort renewed. Why? What is that circumstantial evidence? And what more are you learning about the timeline and what happened to some of the employees in that Wuhan lab?
Well, the main thing I found out with my Wall Street Journal colleagues is that there were three researchers from the lab who, according to American intelligence, fell ill in November 2019 and were so ill that they went to a local hospital. Now, you can't say that it was COVID, you can't say it was a seasonal flu, but circumstantially it's quite significant because the first known confirmed case of COVID-19 in China is December 8th. And so now here you have researchers in the lab going to the hospital just in the weeks prior to the known outbreak. And so there's a lot of interest in this in the U.S. government because it could be a telltale sign that the virus escaped from the lab. Not that it was a biological weapon or that it was in any way engineered by the Chinese, but perhaps they took a virus into the lab to try to work on a potential vaccine, and inadvertently it escaped.
What more can you tell us about this intelligence, the circumstantial evidence here, and how U.S. officials are viewing it? Because from reading your article with your colleagues, it seems as though U.S. officials have different opinions about this intelligence.
Right, and we're straight shooters at the Journal. We're just playing it down the middle. We're not taking a individual stance in this debate. But a number of scientists who previously discounted the lab theory are now coming around to that view. In terms of the government, well, the government did put out a fact sheet on January 15th that was issued by the State Department, which said that some of the researchers fell ill and it deemed this to be significant. And intelligence that informed this fact sheet. Now, Trump administration officials, not surprisingly, give more credence to this circumstantial evidence because they're skeptical of China. The Biden administration didn't provide a comment as to whether they believe it or not, but they do say they support a fuller investigation. And by the way, while the WHO team that visited China said they didn't give any credence to the lab theory, the head of the WHO says the precise opposite, that it needs to be being taken more seriously and more fully investigated. And I would also say that China's own behavior in not sharing information on the safety record of the lab or the tests that the lab researchers may have undergo to see whether they have antibodies, by not sharing a whole host of data about people who got sick in Wuhan province, that behavior, withholding information, has also led to suspicions that, well, maybe they have something to hide.
All right, Michael Gordon, thank you so much for bringing us your latest reporting on this. And as you noted, Michael, a number of high-ranking scientists and health officials subscribe to the COVID-19 lab leak theory. In March, former CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield told CNN he's one of them.
If I was to guess, this virus started transmitting somewhere in September, October in Wuhan.
September, October.
That's my own view. It's an only opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions now. I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory.
All right, so let's bring in CNN medical analyst and cardiologist Dr. Jonathan Reiner, also CNN global affairs analyst Susan Glasser. Great to have you on. Dr. Reiner, let's kick it off with you. Tell us why it's important at this stage to know where the virus originated and who may or may not be responsible in light of this most recent reporting. I mean, denials or not, 166 million people got sick with this virus that we know of.
Right, Pamela, and 3.5 million people around the world have died. But this is not just a blame game. This is just not where we can place the blame for this virus. The Wuhan municipal authorities first announced that there was a cluster of mysterious pneumonia on December 31st. Well, if this report is true, what the Chinese knew was that workers from that lab were sick a month earlier, which meant that the virus had, if this is true, escaped the lab a month earlier. And the world needed to know that a novel virus had escaped containment, because during that period of time, efforts could have been made, to isolate China, isolate parts of that country, and protect the rest of the world. But if this is true, the Chinese chose to remain silent. That's the reason. And going forward, we really need safeguards around the world to prevent this kind of lab accident from happening again, and the world would need to know if it indeed, if there is a virus that breaks containment.
And you say if this is true, and that is because intelligence, as we know, is not a perfect science. According to the Wall Street Journal, this was provided by an international partner, according to one of the sources speaking, and it's being viewed as potentially circumstantial evidence. But the bottom line here, Susan, if China keeps stonewalling any investigation into the origins of the virus, what options does Biden have here, President Biden?
Well, I think, listen, the existence of this intelligence, and Michael, it's a great scoop here, rightly pointed out that this is what apparently underpinned a report from the State Department as far back as January. I think, to me, it indicates, first of all, why the Biden administration obviously has already been aware of this intelligence, why they've actually had a pretty consistent line here of being pretty tough and saying China needs to be more forthcoming. We don't rule out this lab theory, and we demand more investigation. I was sort of expecting them to take a different tone in a way when they came in, and so I think the fact of this intelligence helps me to understand why the Biden administration has actually continued to press China on its lack of cooperation. There's also the issue of the credibility of the World Health Organization, and again, this is in the context of an investigation. Clearly, it was insufficient, the investigation that was initially done last year, and I think, for the sake of understanding the virus going forward, as well as looking backwards, it's pretty obvious that there's this lingering uncertainty, which is extremely troubling.
Right, and it's interesting, just in light, Dr. Reiner, of what Dr. Redfield said to our Sanjay Gupta, that his theory was that it leaked out of the lab, and at the time, there were critics who came out and said, well, he's saying this without evidence, but as we know, he had access to intelligence that others didn't. Regardless of whether COVID-19 leaked from a lab, because we still don't know that definitively, should this entire experience lead to changes in how these labs conduct their work?
Well, indeed. Look, there are very few labs around the world that handle, for instance, smallpox, because of the concern if that kind of pathogen would break containment. It's always been a remarkable coincidence that the epicenter for this virus was the home of a lab that specialized in the study of bat coronaviruses. Your prior guest mentioned that we have not found the animal vector, the animal reservoir for this virus. We haven't found a bat in the wild infected with this virus. And now, if this is true, 3 workers with, by report, potentially respiratory illnesses from that lab getting sick at the end of November. Very, very concerning. Again, all circumstantial, but really, when you start to get so many coincidences, it really starts to raise the concern.
Okay, Dr. Jonathan Reiner, Susan Glasser, thank you both so much.